Radio 1 FM 90. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum. We are live on Radio 1 FM 90, broadcasting from the Central Building, which is the home of Radio 1 FM 90, located on Dastool Street here in the heart of our city, Kampala. Now, this radio station is also live on its website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. When on that website, you look for the icon with the word Listen Live. Click on it, and you'll be taken to a link where you'll be able to listen to us loud and clear. We are also live on the different radio listening apps. Those can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. Look for any, download it, and then look for Radio 1 FM 90. As long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to us from anywhere across this globe. There's also another option. We're on DSTV. Our audio channel there is 897. You can be part of this show in two ways. One, you can call in. Time allowing, I'll open the phone lines for you to do so. But there's a much easier way. That is using the WhatsApp line, which is 0703-090-090. It's much easier because you can engage us as the discussion progresses here in studio. Today we'll be understanding the new government procurement reservation scheme, which was announced recently. And I will be speaking to three guests in studio. Mr. Benson Turiame, who is the Executive Director, Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, PPDA. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, listeners.
Also in studio, Ms. Daphne Nafula, businesswoman. She's also the Director of Home of Sheds. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, viewers.
Also in studio, Mr. Gilbert Senduga, Executive Director at the Africa Freedom of Information Center, AFIC. Good evening, Gilbert, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kenneth. Good evening, dear listeners and viewers.
Well, last week, toward the end of last week, we did learn that the government did come out with new guidelines for reservation of schemes aimed at promoting the participation of local providers in public procurement. They also came out with guidelines on reservation schemes to promote participation of registered associations for women, youth, and persons with disability. At the end of this all, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, which is handling this process, says that they want to see more Ugandans participating in public procurement, well aware that over 60% of our national budget is actually spent through procurement. So today we'll be focusing on these issues and trying to understand how exactly the Ugandan business people can take advantage of these reservation schemes. Let me begin with you, Mr. Turiame, since you are the one who is coming from PPDA, which is administering these guidelines. Why was it necessary to come out with these guidelines in the first place?
Thank you, Kenneth. We needed a legal instrument to operationalize the provision of the PPD Act of 2003. Dear listeners, it was effective after the President's signature on 2nd July 2021. There was a provision that affirmative action should be provided, and to operationalize that section of the Act 59B required that we come up with a clear definitions and clarifications by issuing a guideline. And the guidelines are legal instruments. So breach of them would mean that actually you have breached the laws of this country. And more important also is if you are to have our big population, big percentage of the population of women, which is actually more than 51% of the Uganda's population. We're also talking about the youth, who is more than 70% of the population. And you want to grow the national economy, then you have to provide for this group, so that they can get a share of the national cake that goes through public procurement. And therefore, these guidelines have stipulated areas where local providers, first of all, the Ugandans, resident providers, and East African community providers can benefit, can compete amongst themselves, but also have specific provisions where special interest group, now we can talk about women, youth, and people with disabilities, can also participate. And maybe quickly to talk about a special interest group, that 15% of the budget of all government entities, 15% of all government entities in terms of procurement budget must benefit this group, and there must be demonstration in terms of their procurement planning that 15% has been put aside to benefit this group. And 15% is quite big because around 18 trillion of the budget goes through public procurement. So if we talk about 15%, is around 2.7 trillion. So remember, if this can actually benefit this group, then even household incomes will increase. And you are aware, Kenneth, that a woman's money is not extravagantly spent like some of the men.
I won't say anything.
Who extravagantly spend this money. So we believe if the income, the household income, especially for women, is enhanced, it will further be trickled to economic growth of the country.
All right, so 15% of the total budget of the government of Uganda, let's say, for instance, this time around we have 58.3 trillion shillings,
Yes.
0.4 trillion shillings for next financial year. So 15% of this entire money must be reserved for the special interest groups.
No,
Exactly?
you are looking at, if it is 53, you remove also the debt payment part. You remove salaries, wages, and money that actually doesn't go through public.
So we are looking at the development budget.
Sort of, because there are also procurements, like if you are procuring cleaning services or catering services or consultant services, it may not necessarily be development. But you can put it at a proportion of around 18 trillion that goes through public procurement.
All right.
So 18 trillion of 15%.
15% of 18 trillion must be reserved for special interest groups.
Yes.
All right. What else apart from that specific aspect, 15%?
We are also saying for small contracts because we want to develop the capacity and of this group, and they may not start big, but we are saying all contracts in the central government entities that are below 30 million Uganda shillings, any contract that is to that value must be competed for amongst only this group. And in local government entities, the municipalities, the district local government, the cities, up to 10 million. And most of these contracts, actually, if you look at the percentages, there are many. There are quite many. They could even go beyond the 15% we are talking about if you are to aggregate them. So if you are procuring furniture and you are Ministry of Education, it is 25 billion. Men registered companies or associations are not supposed to participate. If it is a local government, up to 10 million. But aggregatively, even if those contracts were big, we are saying reserve 15% of your budget as a government entity for this group.
All right.
Yes.
Let's hear from a woman who is in business as a beneficiary. What's your take about this NAFULA, this initiative by government, reserving a certain threshold of the procurement budget for women, youth, and people with disability?
Thank you so much, Mr. Benon, for fighting for us. as PPDA, and there is reservations actually going to really support the women, because the women, the kind of contracts we take up are usually small contracts, because we fear the big boys. So we prefer to start with something small. We can be able to supply you food, can be able to come and do cleaning services, we can be able to do maybe stationery at a smaller scale. And this will actually support the women to be able to grow and also to learn the proper steps on how to get into much bigger contracts. So if this 30 million is actually implemented and the central government together with the local government are able to implement it, so the women across the country will be able to benefit. And also it will be a start point, because most of the time we have been procurement, some of them would not give you the real procurement document, like they would want you just request of quotations. Some of them will ask for proposals. Then by the time you get into the big boys category of 500 million, 100 million and above, you'll be prepared and you'll be very ready to actually compete, because now you know what it's required and you know exactly what will be the interest and how to expand and scale your business. So for me, what PPDA together with other organizations are doing to fight for the youth and the women and people with disabilities is something that is going to support them. At least even the grassroots woman will be able to benefit, even if I provided transport. Or just go and look for a box of pens and then supply. I'll be able to earn something and also be able to participate and ensure that the reservations that have been put aside for the woman is actually being utilized.
Well, so, I've listened to you closely. You say if they are able to implement, do you have any fears that actually this might not take off? As a person who has participated in procurement, like you said, you have been able to execute contracts at the level of 5 million, 8 million. Are there any particular restrictions that you think need to be addressed even as this comes on board?
The only thing that we need is just PPDA together with the government to sensitize the women and train them and also give them confidence that actually if they do it, then they will be able to be paid. Most of us women, because we are very low risk takers, we rarely take risks, so it becomes very easy if we participate and we get involved and we are informed. So because when we are informed and we are actually trained on how to go about it, how do you participate in the procurement, then it is easy for every woman, because most of the time it is a fear. The fear that it is expensive, the fear that it's not meant for me, the fear. But once that training is done, then it's very easy for any woman or any person in the designated group can be able to benefit from the group. So it is possible. I have done it from scratch until when I've been able to supply different agencies in the government.
Women who actually complain about the issue of capital, and I thought it was going to come out. Is it possible to actually take advantage of these schemes when actually some people may not actually have capital to even start?
Yeah.
Do you think it's an issue that needs to be addressed?
Yes. It is something that I have been also sharing with the team, is that capital is very important in every business. And if I'm going to do a procurement of 5 million and maybe I only have 2 million, for example, and that's when we encourage, especially women and the youth, to get together into groups and work as a team, because one, as a person, it's very difficult for you to go far. It's about now looking at the people in the same sector that you're working with. If we're in catering, we come together, 5 of us. I bring my 5 million, you bring your 2 million, you bring your 7 million, and then we are able to supply. So that's how we can start. Because capital, I don't believe if anybody's just going to give you money, nobody has money lying there. But if you start to do something, and then if the government pays you after your supply, and then now you can revamp the capital back into the business. So that makes it much easier than crying capital, because if I walked in here and Kenneth, you gave me 10 million to go and supply maybe office furniture or something like that, then it will be all computers. It might be, I might not even spend that money on the computers themselves because it's free money.
All right. I'll be coming to you, Mr. Benson Turame, about a key issue that Ms. Nafula here raises, the issue of actually delaying to pay. Somebody supplies and you're not paying. And you as PPDA, you should have a say on that. There are people generally out there who think government does not pay on time, and that's why you hear the areas, domestic areas, increasing every other financial year. Let's hear from you, Gilbert. What's your take about this initiative by the government?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth, and thank you very much, Ben and Daphne. I actually would like to thank PPDA and the government in general for being responsive in this regard, because between 2020 and 2023, we undertook a research in Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania on the barriers to women's participation in public procurement. And what incentivized us to undertake that research was the recognition that over 60% of the national budget in each of these countries is spent through public procurement, and yet less than 1% of that goes to women. So therefore, understanding the barriers for us was very critical to inform this discussion. And we found a number of issues. We found some legal policy barriers, the laws not recognizing the different abilities and challenges of different citizens, the capacity challenges of businesses, and also social cultural barriers. One of the key things that we found was a very strong intention for women to undertake a business. For example, here in Uganda, we found that 38.2% of registered businesses are actually owned by women. Yet, only 15% of these were registered in the government supplier database, and less than 1% of these were actually participating in public procurement. Therefore, government coming up with this policy instrument is a very important initiative to respond to these kinds of challenges, because we saw that there is a link between policy and action. For example, in Tanzania and Kenya, where actually the reservation scheme started in 2013 and 2016 respectively, we found the proportion of women registered businesses were higher compared to the three countries where there was no affirmative action. So it means that when you have the right policy, people are going to respond. And I believe that we are going to see now many and more women businesses registering, being formed and registering to do business with the government. Now, this said, government has created the right incentive. I think the businesses and other stakeholders now need to invest in the capacities of women businesses, take advantage of this important policy instrument. For example, in Kenya and Tanzania, we found that much as, there was reservation schemes, many women were not participating because they were not aware. Others did not have sufficient access to finance. Others did not have the capacity to prepare and submit responsive bids. And all these were constraining the ability of governments to realize intended objectives of these policies. We also found across the 5 countries a very strong urban bias of the few women businesses that were participating in Uganda here. We found that 69% of the few women-owned businesses that were participating were based in Kampala and Wakiso out of the 139 districts. What this policy initiative means is that every entity, school, hospital, local government out there, will be implementing it, which means that this skewedness of urban bias is likely to be addressed, especially if there is strong enforcement, if there is also strong capacity. Because as we saw in Kenya, for example, the research found that procuring entities were claiming that they would advertise and women businesses would not respond. And therefore, they have to do the business, they have to provide the services. And therefore, the opportunity kept on, looking at them. So there's going to be need to actually undertake massive capacity building programs to prepare women to be positioned to take full advantage of these opportunities. And I think there are certain things that could be done, while government, I think, needs also to look into it. Can we link some of the government programs like WEP, like PDM, to this public procurement and this important policy instrument? The development partners, the CSOs, also can do a lot in contributing to this challenge, because our governments have committed to addressing gender inequality in the SDG framework. And I believe that this is the single most important instrument where money is going through every year could go to these groups that could actually shorten the distance of addressing inequality. So I think there are right incentives to do so. And coming to Uganda here, I think the NRM committed that in the manifesto that it is going to secure everyone. Now, in this case, economic.
When we return, I'll give an opportunity to the PPD Executive Director to respond to some of the issues that have come from DEFIN, but also from Sendugwa, who has given us examples of what is happening in the other countries. But there are also other outlier questions that keep on coming, like people not trusting the procurement process. Like you already had, sometimes government delays to pay, sometimes you put in your bid and you're not the one actually going to win, you're just escorting the others who have already been handpicked to be able to benefit from these businesses. So stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We continue after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. Radio 1 FM 90.
All right, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our topic of discussion today, we are looking at the government procurement reservation scheme, which was announced recently by PPDA, where they are trying to enable as many Ugandans as possible, first of all, in the special interest groups, women, youth, and persons with disability, to partake of the national cake through procurement. 60% of our national budget is actually spent on procurement by the government, central and also local governments combined. And I'm speaking to Mr. Benson Turiame, the Executive Director, Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority. Ms. Defin Afula, a businesswoman. She's the Director of Home of Sheds. We are also speaking to Mr. Gilbert Sendugwa. He's Executive Director, the Africa Freedom of Information Center, AFIC. Well, Mr. Turiame, you heard from your colleagues. Defin raised a number of issues. She welcomes the initiative, but has some fears that you need to actually respond to, helping the women, all the special interest groups in terms of capacity building, information, but also almost the same things that Gilbert raised. Also, although he also raised the issues around the possibility of this system actually being mismanaged and allowing people who are not within the reservation schemes to actually partake of the benefits therein. How would you respond to some of these issues?
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you, my colleagues Gilbert and Daphne, for that good support to the cause. And if we fight together, we'll all be winners. But to begin with, we are talking about registered associations, could be even firms, companies, could be even individuals. The association has been clearly defined in this guideline. So we are working with Uganda Registration Service Bureau to simplify the registration processes, because government will not work in an informal manner. We want whom are we dealing with, because eventually there will be a contractual arrangement which will require two parties, and government can't be deal with an association. It can be even a CBO, actually. It is defined as a community-based organization which is registered at the district. It is also allowed. So simplified as that. But also, in addition to what Daphne said in capacity building, which is our responsibility as PPDA, we are simplifying registration on our national register, which is housed at PPDA. And this will be the information, the data that will be on the register will be disaggregated in terms of gender and those segments. So when we are registering, we'll say, Kenneth, are you Ugandan? Yes, I'm Ugandan. How old are you? I'm 35. So you don't benefit as a youth. If you are 30, then you will be among the beneficiaries. If you are male dominated, more than 51% as a farm, then you also do not benefit from this. But if the majority shareholder of this association or community-based organization or farm company, then you benefit from these provisions. So registration, even at the National Register, which is hosted by PPDA, will be simplified. Meaning that if you are based in Kotido and you need to know women to deal with in different geographical areas, you can even go to our register and pick from there, because the competition will be on amongst themselves. Then when it comes to, of course, we are going to train them in terms of preparing responsive bids, which Gilbert was talking about. But responsive bids, not with complicated and cumbersome documentation. So we are preparing simplified bidding documents which requires you to fill. We are talking about these values. Fill and quote your price. And the requirements are also going to be simplified. You are going to supply stationery, and they're asking you, have you ever supplied stationery in the last 5 years? Or do you need to have that experience? You may not need to have that experience. As long as you can demonstrate that you can supply the stationery, you have some little money. But also we have said, we have allowed actually advance payment. Maybe that can also sort out the payment, where the PSST allows that advance payment can be granted, then that can be granted. Maybe that is another direction we are going in this effort. But more important, what Daphne said in terms of domestic areas and what you raised, Kenneth, and late payments, our providers, service providers of government should also understand how government works. First of all, we are running a cash budget. What you collect is what you spend. But we have an integrated financial management system, IFMIS. And what our providers have missed out is if I write an LPO, a local purchase order, manually and I give it to you, it actually means I don't have money on my account on the system. But if I issue an LPO that is generated from IFMIS, that money has been encumbered and committed for that supply. So that is, I think, what is lacking. But also, it should be our service provider should know that your contract government actually needs these service providers more than what they need government, because they can't run. As government, we can't run.
I thought there was a requirement that you don't start the procurement process when you do not have a budget.
No, that one was clarified by PST sometime back in 2011, because it was delaying the procurement process. You are waiting for the release, and then when the release comes, you start, then it will delay. And money is not spent at the end of the financial year.
Has to revert.
So we allowed that the procurement can proceed, but you don't sign a contract before you confirm.
All right, let's hear from Daphne, your responses to some of the issues you put across, and what's your take? Any other thing that you think needs to be attended to? Are you satisfied with the response given by the ED-PPDA?
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Actually, I'm very excited when I heard about the written LPO and the generated payment.
And the implications.
Yes. That is something very, very, very important, especially for us women who are going to be participating and benefiting from this allocation. Because if I'm aware that they are going to advance me, maybe 20% or 30% or 15% of what I'm supplying, then that actually helps to cover even the issue of capital. So
production cost.
Yes, so no woman should be able to say that I cannot do it. But bottom line is I'll still go back. Capacity building is very important. And then also information seeking. Women, we should just stop being in the kitchen and also buy a few newspapers or log online instead of being on TikTok.
All right.
And be able to learn more about PPDA and what it has to offer as a government.
There's the issue of formation of associations. We have seen an attempt to form circles and all these groups. Sometimes they end into disaster. If conflict emerges, you hear somebody has run away with money that belongs to an association, that belongs to a circle. And it mostly is happening with women groups. How do you maneuver this particular challenge, especially where you intend even to bring on board the local woman? The business etiquette of it.
The business,
and integrity.
The business etiquette of it for the few associations that I belong to and the women's circle that I belong to, there has been serious scrutiny and serious accountability and also compliancy because we are dealing with the local woman's little money, little savings from their businesses to be able to raise capital, especially if they can be able to access loans to be able to go and do their businesses. So personally, where I have been, I belong to a circle, a UWIL circle. It's called Women Investment Club Circle. We've not had those challenges of our leaders running away with the money because everything is documented, and we are following the national actually circle and the cooperative society rules, the bylaws, and also the constitution, which doesn't allow you, an individual, to just sign off checks or just run away with money. Even in leadership, members must be checked.
All right.
Yes.
Gilbert.
Yeah, I think that is one of the areas where Uganda has done well, because one of the problems that the implementation of the Tanzanian reservation scheme faced was a legal requirement for women to participate in groups, because doing business together should be informed by trust and interest and must not be coerced. So here, people can participate as individuals. They can, on their own, agree, to participate collectively using the rules that they have established And I think that helps then each of them to bring what they have for a common objective of undertaking this tender. And I think that's a good start. But again, there's a very long way to walk, even if things are going to be, simplified. The level of documentation, keeping records, and all this, from our research, we found this was a significant area of progress. And of course, also that goes with, records for payments of taxes. And one of the things that we found in the research was women who were participating in low-value contracts, and therefore they were not able to grow even after 10 years. Now, they have, to graduate, and to graduate, they don't need only to participate, but they have to look at the way that they are participating in. What are the requirements? And once they do that, I think the opportunities are going to expand and grow, because if you're participating as a youth, soon you are going to be an adult. And if you have not grown your business, then you'll be thrown out. The second thing that especially government needs to pay attention to is maintaining the confidence in the scheme. Our research found that, for example, in Kenya 2019, there were 99,000 registered businesses that participated in this scheme. But by 2021, it had fallen to 42,000 because of various issues, delayed payments, corruption, and all sorts of things. So I think we need to learn from what has happened elsewhere with this scheme, and not say that, we have put in place a scheme and we have a silver bullet. Also for youth, women, and persons with disabilities, they need to learn and especially invest in developing and strengthening their capacities to take advantage of these opportunities. And they must see this as an opportunity. An opportunity, if you don't, take it, it will keep looking at you, and maybe someone else will grab it, or it will keep staring at you, and then a good intention of the policy is not going to be realized.
Well, let's go back to Benson. How do you ensure that the government entities actually comply? Do you have measures in place to ensure that they actually follow what you're putting across? Because even in the normal procurement process, we have none of entities that actually do not adhere to the procurement rules. Now here, we have sort of a special arrangement. How do you ensure that they adhere?
First of all, Kenneth, all government entities, annually, they come up with procurement plans. And it is a mandatory requirement that procurement plan must be submitted to PPDA and Ministry of Finance. What that means now is that every procurement plan must show contracts or procurements that are reserved for this special interest group. Number two, when they are reporting, it is also a mandatory requirement that monthly every entity reports to the authority on the procurements that have been conducted. What we have added on our template now is disaggregated reporting to indicate the beneficiaries. And you are also aware, Kenneth, that the government, together with the URSB, have now created a beneficial ownership information. So this beneficial ownership information, it is also in our template of reporting. Who was the beneficiary? This is trying to eliminate masqueraders who are men and or non-Ugandans, for that matter, if you look at it broadly, and who masquerade to benefit from some of these preference and reservation schemes. So that disaggregation in terms of reporting will give us information. We are strengthening our performance monitoring units to ensure that that is monthly analyzed, and we raise queries. We can we'll intervene. We have powers. Government, the amended law has given us powers to intervene. And if you are in breach of any provisions, we can even prosecute. Actually, for your information, because of much case backlog at DPP, they're handling high-level cases of murder, rape, terrorism. At times, these procurement issues may not be high on their priority. They have given us prosecution powers. I have a legal chamber of 11 lawyers, which is undergoing training. We have requested the Inspector Government of Police to attach CID investigators. So we are going to bite seriously so that these laws that have been, it is not my law, I'm just an implementer.
All right.
They are executed.
All right. We have some feedback coming in from the listeners, so I'll read out the messages and you will be responding to them. Somebody writes in and says, actually, most companies have started blacklisting government because of delayed payment. We won't give such an opportunity. They say they don't give such an opportunity any priority. That's a comment there from this listener who thinks that government is not paying on time, so those who do not want to do business with government anymore. Then another comment, hello Kenneth, my issue is why isn't PPDA instead dealing with government entities that don't pay service providers, leading to closure of a lot of companies? A lot of companies borrow money from commercial banks to pre-finance government works, and it takes years before payment, leading to attachments of securities provided by companies and then the eventual closure. Somebody thinks you're not paying on time, so people's assets are actually being grabbed by banks and the businesses are collapsing. A comment comes in from Enid who says, my observation is that corruption will not allow this scheme to materialize. Women who are in government, who are government officials, who have enough money will bribe through and inflate their prices to compensate for delayed payments. An ordinary woman who has little capital is not able to sustain a business with sometimes intentional delays to be bribed before your payment can be processed. Bribes are required at every level. And she says, only God can rescue a Ugandan woman. That's a comment there from that particular listener. And I'll come to you, Gilbert, to give your quick response to some of these issues that have been put across. Do you share the fears, or what kind of advice can you give to be able to deal with these kind of fears that are coming from Ugandans?
Yes, the issue of compliance is an important one and significant at that. The law here says that when a contractor has issued an invoice and an invoice is not contested by the provider, by the buyer, it should be paid within 30 days. So there is need really to, to enforce that law and ensure that there is fairness, so that this, what promises to be an opportunity, does not become a grave for Ugandan businesses, especially for these marginalized groups. Secondly, from our research, we found that while this issue of delayed payments was a major issue in the 4 countries, in Rwanda, it was not the case. And we tried to understand why this was the case. We found that the sanctioning regime is stronger, and not the agency but the individual accounting officer. So if, as a result of non-payment, the government is taken to court and you lose a case, then it is you, the accounting officer, to be held liable, not the institution that you lead. Now, here it appears there is some lack of accountability and impunity of some of the people just, not doing what they're really supposed to do. Looking at the data, yes, it is true that in some cases, agencies may not be having funds, but then looking at the data, it is not entirely the case, And women in interviews actually pointed out that this issue of incentives for winning contracts, incentives for getting paid, was quite significant in the 4 countries, excluding Rwanda, on the issue of use what you have. The other issue...
What is that, use what you have?
Now, the issue of... the other issue that needs to be paid attention to, especially by the regulator PPDA, is lame claims by procuring entities that, there were no youth, there were no women or PWDs who expressed interest to do business with government without proving that actually they made effort, to ensure that they do what the law requires. We saw a lot of that in Kenya in our research. And unfortunately, those concerned were not asking the PDEs to prove that actually they did that, and women were not responsive in terms of expressing interest to participate. Now, one of the comments was about resignation. I think while there are challenges in life, it is dangerous to resign and say, I'm not going to do business with government, because government is the biggest, let's say, business person. So I would encourage that this person does not resign and say, we are not going to do anything with supplying to government.
You'll be missing out a lot.
But rather to engage. And I think engagement can bring solutions.
All right. Let's hear from Delphine, your responses to those particular questions, but also your closing remarks, because our time is fast spent.
Okay. The only thing I can say, don't give up. One agency can tell you we shall pay on time, they don't, but you keep going, the next one will pay, and then you'll see how to cover up as you continue to pursue the other payment. And as the ED from PPDA mentioned, that you have to be very careful before you sign the contract, because most of the time it is something that can be able to affect your business. So be careful before signing the contract. So my humble advice to the women and the youth, or the people who are going to be able to benefit from this, is that seek information. When you hear PPDA is coming to your area to train, please show up, because you never know. It's an opportunity. I saw the opportunity. I jumped onto the bus, and I've been able to actually benefit from this journey.
All right. Benson, your closing remarks as we come to the end of this show.
Yeah, going forward, in terms of payments, these questions were made on payments, direct payments. We have actually automated the procurement process, and automation requires that we integrate the procurement process to the payment process at Ministry of Finance. And what this implies is that the process will not allow you to continue with the procurement if there is no money to pay. So going forward, that integration of electronic government procurement system and FMS will resolve that. I know government will be stuck in terms of they have been living on debts.
That's good.
Yeah, they have been living on debts. You want to buy food for police or prisons, you get a service provider who is willing and lenient, and he supplies you, you don't have money to pay, and you continue.
All right.
But my closing remarks is that I want everybody, especially the youth councils, the women councils, to be our partners in monitoring implementation of this.
Okay.
We have intentions, we are deliberate to ensure that this sector, this type of segment benefits from public procurement.
And what I can assure you, as a media, we will continue monitoring this particular arrangement to see if it will deliver. 1 year later, we'll be trying to do an audit to see how many women have actually benefited from this. Well, I've been your host, Kenneth Lukwagandason. Wishing you a very good evening. Up next, we have the news in English. Thereafter, we'll continue our broadcasting with the Soul Train, which will be brought to you by BB Junior.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.